Hello and welcome to the Chiaroscuro Jazz Podcasts. I'm George Graham, Director of Artistry and Repertoire for the Venerable Jazz record label, which for over a half-century has been presenting music from some of the world's great jazz musicians. In this series, we'll have conversations with some of today's outstanding players and their thoughts on some of the artists who have recorded for Chiaroscuro. This time we feature keyboard player Clifford Carter. For some 50 years, Clifford Carter has been active in the jazz world and has also been ubiquitous as a studio musician, recording with James Taylor, Michael Franks, Linda Ronstadt, Bette Midler, Art Garfunkel, and others. I started by asking him about his musical background and what drew him into making music.
Well, there was a piano in my house, and my mother played some, and my father was a singer who then took up bass. I said he was a singer. After he served in the war, in World War II, he had a run as a radio personality. And he had a show called A Date with Jerry in WTOP. I believe it was Washington, D.C.
Yeah, Washington, D.C., right, yeah.
And the format was, he was the male vocalist, there was a female vocalist, and there was a moderator. And, you know, there would be this banter, oh, that makes me think of this song. He would get his feature song, she would get a feature song, and then they would sing something together. And, you know, it was American Songbook, and, you know, BMI ASCAP used to send him music, and we had all this music around the house. And, you know, by the time I was born, he had segued into so-called day gigs, which led to a career outside of music. But he played, at least for the first 14, 15 years of my life, he played club dates and like fronted bands. And he was always singing around the house. I mean, and he'd look he'd look at me right in the eye and sing. And I think we were both unaware that he was zapping me, you know, for the love of song. And, you know, you're a kid, he's looking you right in the eye, and sometimes you're kind of looking away, like, what's happening here? Other times you're looking right back. But, you know, talk about early musical influences. That was huge. I mean, I started piano lessons when I was 6. But for, you know, 5-ish years, music was preparing for my weekly lessons by myself. But then the fateful performance on the Ed Sullivan Show, February '64, and then the lads from Liverpool talk about zapping us. You know, that was a huge influence. And I went from, as I said, music being something that I prepared by myself to getting together with peers and making music and performing and touching upon writing. And so that was, you know, major event.
Well, when you were studying, it was mainly classical music?
Great question. Yeah, you know, when you're 6 and you start out, you're playing stuff that Mozart wrote when he was 5.
Yeah, right.
And yeah, classical, but we started getting into popular music. I remember working on music from West Side Story. But actually, another major event was I was 13, maybe pushing 14, and I started listening to this band from New York City led by Al Cooper, the Blues Project. And my teacher could sense that I was kind of frustrated. I was looking for, like, well, how do I get into this? And said, well, what do you want to do? So I brought these records into my lessons. He goes, oh, so yeah, you want to play blues and jazz. And so he got me this book called Tools for Improvisation by Jerry Coker. And we started working out of this book, and it, dealt with the building blocks and music theory of jazz. But actually, that was kind of like something that I was doing on my own. But the music I was actually playing with my peers was not coming from that. I mean, it included it on some levels in terms of modes, but it wasn't coming from the jazz language of Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. That came later. The music that I was playing was rooted in rock, and maybe, the term jam band hadn't been stated yet, but we were into improvising and playing.
Yeah, well, the Blues Project was famously improv. They did these long improvisations. Yeah, they were a great band.
I have so many stories like that. I was just talking about the Beatles being that influence, and this past March, I had this wonderful opportunity. Good friend of mine, great drummer, Steve Jordan, who has become a great producer, great songwriter. Those of you who know his career, he's jumped in with the Rolling Stones after Charlie Watts passed away. And, we go way back and we're friends. And he was music director for a show at Carnegie Hall in mid-March, playing the music of Paul McCartney. And he asked me to play, so I played. And a few days ago, I got a letter from the subject matter in the email was Sir Paul McCartney's office. And it was actually a letter from Paul thanking me for participating.
Wow.
Needless to say, given what I've said today, it's like so beautiful. And I responded, and now this little back and forth thing, but there was another full circle event. And then I started studying from this guy named Mitch Farber, who I'm a friend of his to this day. And he's the one that started getting me, said, you got to go out and get Kind of Blue, Miles Davis, Giant Steps, John Coltrane, Now He Sings, Now He Sobs, Chick Corea. Those lessons were just incredible. And he's the one that told me about the University of Miami, told me, you got to check it out. I went down there and stayed with some friends of his because he had done some graduate work there. I realized right away that this was the place for me. And who was the head of the jazz department? Jerry Coker, the guy whose book I had been studying from. So, and he was just a great educator, really supportive. This program is very well known now. It's now called the Frost School of Music at the University of Miami, and it's one of many programs around the country now. Back then, it was one of very few programs, and it was small. I think there was like 32 of us when I first showed up, and it was this major called Studio Music and Jazz. So you got like hands-on lessons from Jerry, and it was just a great experience.
Well, then you started getting involved professionally, I assume, that from that point after you graduated.
Well, actually, I made the transition to being a full-time professional musician while I was still in school because, the word gets around, hey, there's this kid here at the school, he can play some stuff. And, my teachers started recommending me, and I'm starting to like gig around town. And my teachers are like in various classes are in the horn section. And there was this club up in Fort Lauderdale called Bachelor's 3. And they would have like, name acts coming through who would need sidemen to augment their road band. Sometimes they need horns. And in this one case, I would get called, played with Bobby Vinton, the Coasters, Lana Cantrell. And the contractor was this trombone player named Peter Graves, who was good friends with Jaco Pastorius, but that's a whole nother story. But so he calls me, it was the summer of 74. He said, are you available to play the Four Tops show? They were coming through. They had an MD named Gil Askey. They come from the Motown days. He had worked with Diana Ross. And they had a guitar, bass, and drums. but their keyboard player had left and they needed a keyboard player. So I showed up there, and the format is you run the songs that afternoon, and then you start like a 2-week run that night. And after the sound check, Gil asked me, the band leader said, "Hey, I like your vibe. Like, would you like to come on the road with us?" And initially, it sounded like he was speaking Japanese because I just wasn't thinking that way. But the next day, after speaking with my folks, I said, "Yeah." And I left and spent a year with them, and then moved to New York City. And that year with them was just a beautiful year of indoctrination into the world outside of school, for sure. I got to record with them. I got to write for them. Travel to the Far East, Japan, Hong Kong. Spent 5 weeks in England, 36 straight nights without a night off. It was just, one night you'd be playing a club on the outskirts of Atlanta. The next night you'd be playing packed house at Madison Square Garden. We played, it was Tommy James and the Shondells, Jay and the Americans, Four Tops, and Four Seasons. I turned 22 2 days after I met them, and it was a fun time.
Yeah, learning life on the road. That's what gets you the. That's the other half of education. There's the school, and then there's the road.
Yeah, it's one thing to learn to play music. It's another thing to be out there living it. I've had a few private students over the years. I don't teach a lot, but people say, "Hey, would you teach?" And I go, "Yeah." And I like working with people one-on-one.
Well, now once you settled in New York, I see that you were involved with that label that Creed Taylor founded, CTI Records. Were you part of the house band for that?
Well, in a sense, yeah, I was a freelance player, and my teacher, Mitch Farber, who had encouraged me to go to the University of Miami, he's now living in Manhattan. I'm living in Manhattan, and he had already been on the scene. He was a arranger and a writer, and he was arranging for sessions. And he recommended me. There was this office in New York of writers and arrangers, and the people who actually, what do you call them? Calligraphers, the people who actually write the charts. This is before computers, before Sibelius and Finale. And Mitch recommended me to Dave Matthews, the jazz pianist and arranger. So he started calling me for sessions, and Idris Muhammad, Hank Crawford, Jeremy Steig, Yusef Lateef, these, and they were making, I guess, what you call crossover records. This wasn't ding ding ding. This was pat pat. This was backbeat, groove jazz, if you will.
Right. Yeah. Well, they had their own definite sound. That CTI kind of promulgated. I guess it's before the real beginning of fusion, but it sort of peaked in that direction.
I would say that it wasn't necessarily before the beginning. I think it was of that time. Because we're talking 76, 77, 78,
Oh, yeah.
And so by that time, you had already had Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Right. Miles and Mahavishnu and Billy Cobham and people like that, in the early 70s.
Headhunters with Herbie and Chicks Electric stuff, So, yeah. But it was, just a great opportunity because I was in there with great players and grateful to be paying the rent, making records. Another person that I met in school, Patty Scalfa, who now a member of the E Street Band, married to that guy who leads it. What did you say his name again? Yeah. Okay. So we had this band, and there was this alto player at the U named Joe Donato, who he had a band, and he said, "Hey, I got like overflow gigs I can't do. Do you and Patty want to do this stuff?" So I said, "Sure." And he said, "Well, do you have a band?" And I said, "Well, I can get some guys from the U, and me and Patty will put it together." He goes, "Well, can I recommend a drummer?" And he gives me the name of this guy named Michael Walden. And I called Michael. We did the gig. As soon as we started playing, it was like, whoa, this was something special. And there was nobody at the U playing like that. In a few years, he's replacing Billy Cobham in the Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Right.
And 3 or 4 years later, we're down at Electric Lady recording with Don Cherry. So
I should also point out the Chiaroscuro connection with Narada Michael Walter, because he is on the James Mason album that was released in 1977.
Yeah, and you have Jerry Mulligan, some
right.
Jerry Mulligan,
mm-hmm.
right? He was an artist in residence for a year at the U when I was down there. So I'd see him coming and going every day, and I'd listen to him playing with the jazz band, like the Best Cats. And he kind of became our friends, and he would come to our gigs, our local bar gigs. So one night, me and Patty and our friends were playing at this little bar called the Hosta. It was like adjacent to a little restaurant. And I look up, and who's walking in the room? Walking into this little bar. I mean, I'm talking little bar. It's Jerry and Joni Mitchell and her parents and John Guerin, because
the drummer, yeah,
they're on the road with the LA Express on Joni's Miles of Isle tour, and Jerry's friends with them, and he brings them in, and I was young, and this stuff didn't happen. And John sat in, we played. I got a chance to speak with Joni, and truth be told, we're playing Herbie's Maiden Voyage, and I'm about to solo, and my whole life's flashing before me, but the club owner just shut us down.
Oh,
he just said, it's late, get out of here, and he made us all leave. It was like, you've got to be kidding me. This was like, an extraordinary event. But yeah, I saw Jerry on the record label, and Gene Bertoncini, and I know Gene. I actually saw him during the pandemic, maybe like a year and a half ago. There's a venue in Ossining, New York, and he played duo with, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, Alexis Cole, a wonderful jazz vocalist. And, they were really going for it. She was handing him lead sheets, and he was just coming up with intros, and it was great. And I'd gotten a chance to work with him a little in New York, and I used to go see him. Again, Mitch Farber turned me on to Gene Bertoncini. And on this record, I think it was Bill Charlotte playing some piano, and they had a version of All the Things You Are as a samba, which I really dug. So now, if I play All the Things You Are, I do it as a samba. Just try something a little different. Those guys influenced me in that way.
Gene always did a lot of wonderful things with Latin with his acoustic guitar when he got that out, and did some really nice things. Yeah, let's talk about some of your studio work, because you have been pretty ubiquitous in the studio. Are there particular memorable events or sessions that you might want to share with our listeners?
Well, in 1985, I got called to play some sessions on a James Taylor record. And I was good friends with Don Grolnick, who I met the first month I came to live in Manhattan. And so I played some small parts on a few songs. And Don asked me, if I would kind of play that role, cover that stuff, play Hammond organ, play electric piano, but also cover synth stuff. And so that kind of deepened my role and relationship in James's world. And as it unfolded, I got to play on a lot of sessions, which were really, really fun and really great. And there was a record called Hourglass, where James asked me to come up with a bass player, Jimmy Johnson, and a drummer, Carlos Vega, to come up to Martha's Vineyard. And I think James wanted to record in a more low profile environment, away from a big city studio, to have the freedom to experiment. And it went so well that all the tracks we cut ended up being the record Hourglass. It was really great because, it was bittersweet, quite frankly, because Don was sick at the time. When people appreciated the record, it did well. It was a really great experience.
We go on harmonizing a song, or she's reciting a poem. Owls fly by and they give me the eye, walking my baby back home. We stop.
I noticed you've been on a couple of albums by Michael Franks, and I've always admired his stuff. His so jazzy and light in a way. Some people kind of criticize him, but I've always liked his kind of slightly humorous but jazzy. Joe Sample was on some of those, and
absolutely, their band called Elements.
Yeah, and of course they backed up Pat Metheny back in his.
Yeah, they were the original rhythm section. Pat Metheny, who was also at the University of Miami at the same time we all were. So they took their musical union into the professional world. And, Manolo Bedreno played percussion, Bill Evans played saxophone, Steve Kahn played guitar, Joe Carroll played guitar also in a different incarnation of the band. And, we played in Europe, we played around the States, and we really got to stretch out. It was great fun, and we got to record too. I remember one day we were rehearsing, and I was playing this little groove in F minor, and he said to me, "Well, what is that?" I go, "Oh, it's this little groove I'm working on." He said, "Well, let's write something about that." So we wrote this tune, wrote this song. I met this woman who ended up marrying at a Michael Franks gig, and I woke up from a dream. Literally woke up from a dream, and I was dreaming. This woman was in my dream who I just met. And I said to myself, I said, "I just met this person. Now you're in my dreams." I said, great title. So I finished writing this music. I wrote the music and the groove and the melody, and I gave the demo tape to Michael, and I said, "Hey, I got this idea for a song called Now You're in My Dreams, how you meet somebody, blah, blah, blah." I said, you don't have to do that if you don't want to, and he took it and he ran with it, and he kept that theme, and he wrote a great lyric, and it's on this record. He sang it as a duet with Patty Austin, and I got to play on it. Rob Mounsey produced it.
Well, now tell us about some of the more recent projects you might have been involved with. I mean, your career goes back to the early to mid '70s, but you're still active. And tell us about some of the things you're working on now and that people would be interested to know about.
I've been getting together with a wonderful bass player named Malcolm Gold, and we've been playing duo. He's just playing upright, and I have a beautiful Steinway piano in my home studio. And we've just been playing a lot together, woodshedding and stuff. And when I heard that I was going to do this with you, I said, I want to record something that we've been working on. We recorded a version of Ray Charles' Hallelujah, I Love Her So, which I was inspired to play because of Joe Sample. And he had made a record as a co-leader with David D. Walker, probably late 70s, early 80s. And it's the kind of Ray Charles blues R&B side of Joe's playing, which I really dig. And they have a version of it. And I kind of, truth be told, stole some of the arrangement ideas. And they have a whole band playing with guitar and horn stuff. We're just playing duo. Another great jazz musician that I get a chance to work with is a jazz trumpet player from Japan, but who's been living in the United States for many years, is Shunzo Ono. He used to play in the Gil Evans band down at Sweet Basil's. And I've done another number of record projects with him. Over the last 10 years, I've had a great relationship with a great artist named Idina Menzel. She is from New York, from Long Island, and she's an actress and a singer, and she made her name for herself originally in the original cast of the Broadway show Rent, and she was the original green witch in the show Wicked, and So Rob Mounsey, the great arranger and keyboard player in New York City, was her musical director. And he kind of passed the baton to me. So I have been her musical director for a number of years. It's really interesting. I've encouraged her to do some stuff. And I remember one time she told me, she said, well, I'm not a jazz singer, but I think she sells herself a little short. And one of the reasons why I love the gig is because the set list is always really eclectic. And of course it has songs from the Broadway shows, but we'll do everything from Joni Mitchell to American Songbook. And it's really challenging, and I get to arrange, and that's kind of an ongoing relationship.
Like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down.
Well, let me throw a couple of names of Chiaroscuro artists out at you and see if you have any thoughts on them and whether you have familiarity or whatever. Pianist we did an album with a few years ago, Bill Mays.
I actually crossed paths with Bill doing session work in the late 80s or 90s. I know we were up at Clinton recording, and I got to meet him and really enjoyed his playing. And he was really sweet because I had heard a recording of his. What was the name of that song? Ain't Necessarily So. And he was nice enough to send me his chart on it. Great player.
Got to know him pretty well, and I produced an album with him in a trio with a piano, cello, and trumpet with Marvin Stamm on trumpet.
Yeah, used to see Marvin all the time, in the session scene. just feel so grateful for those days where I got to, see these people on any given day. And yeah, it's not like we were making amazing jazz records at the time, but still, it was, high level playing for whatever we were asked to do that day. I loved studying the roots of it all. Whether it's Teddy or Wynton or Kelly, Red Garland, Ted Wilson. Isn't it Red Garland's piano that it was his piano that was up at NOLA recording on 57th Street? You aware of NOLA?
Yes, I'm familiar with it. I didn't know the story of the piano.
I think that was his piano.
Mm-hmm.
And the piano up at Clinton recording on 46 and 10 was the piano from the Kind of Blue sessions.
Oh, really? Wow.
So yeah, that was used on a gazillion records and film scores, all kinds of stuff. I love studying the roots of everything, transcribing, but when it comes to making music, what I'm attracted to and what I strive for, and it's kind of always been this way from a young age, I'm looking for that melting pot. Music that draws from all these different histories and is beyond definition.
Thanks to Clifford Carter for sharing his thoughts and experiences with us. Let's go out with a track from a Chiaroscuro album that Clifford mentioned earlier, with guitarist Gene Bertoncini, pianist Bill Charlap, and bassist Sean Smith from their eponymous album, a piece called Japanese Maple. Guitarist Gene Bertoncini with pianist Bill Charlap and bassist Sean Smith from their joint Chiaroscuro album called Gene Bertoncini with Bill Charlap and Sean Smith. You can find this and more than 100 other Chiaroscuro titles on our website at chiaroscurojazz.org, where you can find more of these podcasts. And why not subscribe wherever you get your podcasts? This is George Graham, your writer and producer for this podcast series. Our co-producer is Jim Della Croce. Thanks for joining us.